Writing lesson 3 is a huge tip that many students tend to struggle with initially. When you answer any prompt, when you're doing a rhetorical analysis or answering a constructed response question, say in English 2, you want to make sure that you very precisely and concisely answer the question. It's more than just getting the question right. You want to word it and structure it in a way that is very, very crystal clear to your audience, and also do it in a way that doesn't take up a bunch of words and confuse the reader. Be precise and concise. So let's talk about what a thesis is. Your thesis is your answer to your question. It's your argument, it's your judgment or opinion about a topic. And when you structure an entire essay, it's centered around your argument, your thesis. So you want to present your thesis in your introduction paragraph. Your body paragraph is where you develop and support your thesis, strengthening your argument, and your conclusion then reinforces your thesis and provides closure for your reader. For all my visual learners, here is a nice structure, visual structure of an essay. This is a very long essay with 4 body paragraphs, and I typically only require that you do 2 fully developed body paragraphs, but you can see how important the thesis statement is. You begin with it, your body paragraphs support it, and you conclude by restating your thesis or review your key points. You want to be careful how you phrase your thesis, as it's more than just a title, it's more than just an announcement, and especially it's more than just an obvious fact. If you have the prompt of, or the task rather, of writing about a lesson that changed your outlook, you might write about a time where you witnessed someone cheating but you decided not to tell on them. So a nice title might be Speaking Out, but that's not really a thesis. That's nothing insightful that you learn. That's not an argument or a judgment or opinion. A lot of students tend to write an announcement as their thesis statement, and that's not good either. An example is, this essay will discuss a time when I could have spoken out loud but did not. Well, what you're doing here is you're announcing what your essay is going to be about. You're essentially rephrasing the prompt or the assignment. You're not offering that insight, that answer to the question. Statement of facts are tricky because initially they might sound like a good thesis statement. It's the beginning of a good thesis statement, I guess, but it doesn't fully answer the question. Once I saw someone cheating and did not speak out. That doesn't offer any kind of insight into the lesson learned. So you're touching on the prompt here, but you're not fully addressing it. A good thesis statement will look something like this. As I look back at the cheating I witnessed, I wondered why I kept silent and what would have happened if I had acted. You want to make sure that you always include a 1-sentence explicit thesis statement in your introduction paragraph. Always do it in every type of essay that you write. Always include that explicit thesis in your introduction paragraph. Now, some of you may have learned this acronym for writing a body paragraph last year called RAPS. RAPS is when you're given a question, like a constructed response question on the English 2 EOC, and you have to construct your answer to it. The R and the A, the R stands for restate your question and then answer your question. P stands for provide textual evidence, and your S is your analysis, your so what. So let's say we have this question. How does Elie Wiesel use language to develop his tone in the first chapter of Night? So even though we see one question mark, this is kind of a loaded question. It's essentially asking for 3 things. It's asking for what type of language does Elie Wiesel use, specifically, metaphors, similes, imagery, diction or syntax. It's also asking what is his tone. Is it happy? Is it devastating? And then finally, the third aspect of this question is how does the language develop the tone specifically? So let's look at some examples here. In your first sentence, do you have to ask yourself if you say what type of language it is? Do you say what the tone is? Here is not a great example. The author uses language to develop the tone by. That's restating the question, but it's not really addressing what the question is asking. This one's a little better. The author uses figurative language through simile and metaphor to develop the suspenseful tone. Here we have some other examples. If the prompt is saying, how does the author use characterization to develop the theme in To Kill a Mockingbird? Let's just check our wraps here. Does the writer restate the question, answer the question, or provide evidence? Harper Lee uses characterization to develop theme. Well, here we see that the student restates the question, but they don't address which type of characterization, they don't address what the theme is, and especially they don't address how the author uses these tools to develop the theme. What about this one? Harper Lee uses characterization to develop the theme by what the characters say. Here we have a student who answers the how, but they still don't address the type of characterization and they don't mention the theme. So this is still lacking as far as answering the prompt and addressing all that's asked. Let's continue. Harper Lee uses indirect characterization to develop the theme of empathy through the quotes and actions of Atticus Finch. That is an amazing thesis that clearly answers and addresses all of the components of the prompt. Which type of characterization is used, what the theme is, it's about empathy, and also how through the characters of Atticus Finch. The next part is providing the textual evidence. And I feel like I'm driving along in my car and everything's going so smoothly, and then I hit a roadblock. This student started out so strongly, but then they just threw in a quote without context. And if you haven't read the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, you really wouldn't understand this quote, what it has to do with anything. So to make it even better, we're going to take our thesis. Harper Lee uses indirect characterization to develop the theme of empathy through the quotes and actions of Atticus Finch. And then we're going to provide some context, some transitional phrases to make it not choppy, but to make it smooth and flow. It says, in the novel, young Scout naively judges some of the other characters. Her father, Atticus, teaches her daughter a lesson by explaining to her, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. Now, as far as raps goes, your body paragraph essentially, this is lacking analysis. You have proven that you've understand the prompt, that you've answered the prompt, and that you've pulled details to support your thesis, but you haven't really truly analyzed it yet. So we will talk more. Analysis is a whole other writing lesson that we'll get to. I want to conclude with some examples of students last semester who answered this prompt for the Q3 on the AP exam. So this is relating to cheating, and this is an essay that required students to actually write and construct their own arguments. And you can see here that the prompt gives an excerpt from a news story, and then the question says, using appropriate support, write an editorial for your school or local newspaper in which you develop a position on the issues raised in this news story. That's the prompt. I'm not going to take time to actually read it. I mean, you can pause it and read it if you want to. But the prompt, the task, is to develop a position on the issues raised in the news story. Some of my students really struggled with this last semester. These are some issues I had with their introductions with their thesis statements. First, many students didn't mention Pelton, who was the teacher, or the incident in Kansas at all. Rather, they rephrased or explained the Kansas incident, maybe, but they never took a stance on their own. This actually deflects the argumentative purpose. Instead, you are explaining someone else's claim, which is rhetorical analysis. You're not following through with the prompt. The second issue that I had was there was no explicit thesis. What is your position on the issues raised in the story? With no thesis for an AP prompt, A student cannot score higher than a level 4. So I have just a few examples to conclude, and we'll talk about whether or not they address the prompt, um, whether they have a strong thesis that answers the prompt in their introduction. As Kansas Piper claims, plagiarism demoralizes the individual participant and degrades the integrity of national education. Some may claim that advancements in technology have provided an accessible platform that enables students to utilize the research from others and incorporate it into their own creations. However, it is also safe to say that it has led to an increase in stolen creations and falsified identification, which can be described as plagiarism. A major pioneer of this is the Internet, which was invented by Vint Cerf and Robert E. Kahn on January 1st, 1983 under the name APRONET. The Internet by itself was not capable of creating plagiarism, and it wasn't until Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web on March of 1989 and Mark Andreessen invented the first web browser, Mosaic, on January 23rd, probably 1992, that plagiarism became a major issue in society. So going back to the prompt, write an editorial in which you develop a position on the issues raised in the news story. Does this introduction do that? The answer is no. This is a nice history lesson on the internet. It has nothing to do with the Kansas incident of cheating. This definitely veers away from the topic, and there is no clear thesis statement that addresses their stance on the issue. Let's look at this one. Cheating is an issue that needs to be firmly addressed. The purpose of any school, including our own, is to prepare children for the future, and this extends beyond their education. Children should be taught the values of honesty and integrity as well. Cheating undermines these values, and thus severe punishments against students who cheat are justified, although the severity of the punishment should depend on the importance of the work they cheated on. So, pretty well written, but the question is asking, what is your position on the issues of the newspaper article, the incident in Kansas? This is very vague and talks about cheating in general. It doesn't mention the article at all, what's happening in the Kansas school with the teacher Pelton. This does not fully address the question either. So let's read our last one. Cheating is a very prominent issue in today's society, especially in schools. Due to the abundance of resources available for students' usage, it is a very common, easy thing to do. This creates a very controversial topic when cheating occurs and when the guilty are caught. What should the consequences be? In Kansas, a biology teacher, Christine Pelton, caught nearly 1/5 of her students plagiarizing on their semester projects and gave each student a 0. After parents complained about their kids failing, the school board told Pelton that she needed to go easier on the students. The issue is the backing of the school system, who should not have told her to go easier and should have defended Pelton. So the thesis statement in this introduction paragraph comes at the very end. We set up, we provide context to the prompt, a nice summary of the prompt, and then this student provides his or her position. The school system should not have told her to go. The school system should have defended her. This is a clear thesis statement. I hope this has helped. If you ever have questions about your thesis statements, please come and see me. All I need to do is read them, and I'll very quickly tell you whether they suffice or not.